The sun, a molten eye peering over the jagged horizon of Haleakala, cast long skeletal shadows across the rugged lava fields. Elias, his face weathered like the ancient stones beneath his worn leather boots, squinted into the nascent light. The air, already warm with the promise of a day's relentless heat, carried the faint scent of dry grasses and the ever-present tang of volcanic dust. His mount, a sturdy bay named Io, shifted beneath him, a low rumble in its chest, a familiar companion to the quiet hum of the early morning. Elias patted the horse's neck, a gesture as ingrained as breathing. Another day, another trek across the slopes. The herd, a restless mass of brown and black against the stark monochrome of the land, stirred in their corrals. The rhythmic clinking of their hobbles was a gentle percussion in the vast stillness. Elias was a paniolo, a cowboy of Hawaii, and this was his domain, the high country, where the earth breathed fire and the wind whispered secrets of the ages. His grandfather had been a paniolo, and his father before him. The rhythm of this life, the slow, dusty journey, was etched into his very bones. He took a deep, slow breath, the dust tickling his throat, and nudged Io forward, the first step of a journey that would stretch across days, across miles of unforgiving, beautiful terrain. The journey was not a race, it was a pilgrimage, a slow dance with the land. The weight of his saddle felt like a familiar embrace, the worn leather conforming to the contours of his body. He adjusted the brim of his hat, a weathered Stetson that had seen more sunrises than he could count. The land here was raw, untamed, a testament to the primal forces that shaped it. Every ridge, every ravine held a story, a memory etched in stone and wind. Elias felt a profound connection to this place, a sense of belonging that ran deeper than blood. He was a steward of this rugged landscape, a guardian of its silent, enduring power. The herd, a living entity, began to move as a single flowing wave, their hooves striking the volcanic rock with a rhythmic and percussive beat. The sound was a constant, a soft murmur against the vast silence, a reminder of the life that pulsed through this desolate beauty. Elias guided them with a gentle pressure of his knees, his eyes never straying from the path ahead. Kiko, his nephew, rode a little distance behind, his younger energy a bright spark against the muted tones of the morning. Elias appreciated Kiko's presence. It was a silent reassurance that this way of life, this solitary communion with nature, would continue. He caught Kiko's eye, a fleeting moment of shared understanding passing between them. There was no need for words. The shared labor, the shared respect for the land spoke for itself. The sun continued its ascent, its warmth beginning to seep into the earth, promising a day of sustained heat. Elias took another slow breath, the dust filling his lungs, a familiar sensation that was as much a part of him as the air he breathed. This was the beginning, the slow unfurling of another day on the volcanic slopes. The dust, Elias thought, was the soul of this land. It settled on everything, a fine, pervasive powder that softened sharp edges, muted vibrant colors, and clung to skin and cloth with an almost affectionate persistence. As the herd moved, the dust rose in clouds, shimmering golden in the sunlight, a constantly shifting veil that separated them from the distant, hazy ocean. Elias kept a steady hand on the reins, his eyes scanning the undulating landscape. Each curve of the lava flow, each sparse patch of una grass was as familiar to him as the lines on his own palm. He knew the hidden springs, the sheltered hollows where the wind might offer a brief respite, the treacherous gullies that demanded respect. Io moved with an easy gait, accustomed to the uneven ground. Elias felt the familiar ache in his back, the slight stiffness in his knees, the quiet weariness that was not of the body, but of time itself, of countless days spent under this relentless sun, herding these patient creatures. He saw Kiko, his nephew, a younger man with a less ingrained weariness in his eyes, expertly guiding a group of recalcitrant steers away from a patch of particularly sharp pahoehoe. Kiko's shouts, though sharp, were not angry, merely the necessary punctuation in the slow symphony of the herd. Elias offered a slight nod of acknowledgement, a silent approval of Kiko's skill. There was a quiet pride in seeing the next generation learn this ancient craft, this solitary communion with the land and its beasts. The air grew warmer, the sun climbing higher, pressing down with its weight. The dust coated his beard, settling into the fine lines etched by years of squinting into the sun. It was a fine, almost talc-like powder that clung to the coarse wool of his shirt, the worn leather of his chaps. It softened the harsh lines of the volcanic rock, creating a muted, almost dreamlike quality to the landscape. Elias found a certain comfort in its pervasiveness. It was a tangible representation of the island's enduring presence, a constant reminder of where he belonged. He watched a group of heifers drift towards a particularly rugged section of lava, their curiosity piqued by some unseen attraction. With a soft whistle, Elias urged Io forward, gently nudging them back into the main body of the herd. There was no rush, no urgency, only the slow, deliberate rhythm of their movement. Each animal, each stone, each blade of una grass played its part in the unfolding tapestry of the day. He saw Kiko expertly cut out a steer that was lagging behind, his movements economical and sure. The boy was learning well, absorbing the unspoken lessons of the land. Elias felt a quiet satisfaction in that observation. This way of life, passed down through generations, was not merely about herding cattle. It was about a deep, abiding respect for the natural world, for the patient strength of the land itself. The sun's rays, now directly overhead, cast no shadows, the light a stark, unwavering glare. The heat began to build, a palpable force that pressed down on the vast, open plains. Elias adjusted his scarf, a thin barrier against the accumulating dust and the biting sun. The midday sun beat down with an intensity that seemed to leach the very color from the world. The dust, disturbed by the ceaseless movement of the cattle, hung thicker now, a hazy curtain that blurred the horizon. Elias shielded his eyes, his gaze sweeping over the herd. They moved with a steady, unhurried rhythm, their wide horns catching the sunlight, their breath misting in the still air. He could hear the lowing, a continuous, mournful sound that seemed to echo the vastness of the surrounding landscape. Io, sensing the heat, began to sweat, the dark, slick sheen on its flanks reflecting the golden dust. Elias felt the dampness on his own skin, the salty residue left by evaporated sweat. He longed for the shade of a ohia lehua tree, for the cool whisper of a mountain stream, but the open slopes offered little solace. This was the heart of the journey, the slow, deliberate pushing of the herd towards the distant grazing lands. There was a profound sense of isolation here, a feeling of being a small, solitary figure in an immense, ancient world. Yet it was a solitude he had learned to embrace, a quiet comfort in the predictable rhythm of his days. He recalled his father's words, spoken many years ago as they traversed these very slopes. "The land will teach you patience, Elias. It has no need for haste." He understood now, more deeply than ever, the truth in those words. The silence was vast, broken only by the muffled sounds of the herd and the occasional creak of saddle leather. Elias found himself listening to the very heartbeat of the island, the slow, deep pulse of the earth beneath him. He could almost feel the ancient fires that had once raged here, the raw power that had sculpted this rugged terrain. The cattle moved with a collective wisdom, their bodies adjusted to the demands of this environment. They were hardy creatures, their thick hides and sturdy frames perfectly suited to the volcanic slopes. Elias admired their resilience, their stoic endurance under the relentless sun. He often found himself comparing their quiet strength to his own. There was a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of their mutual reliance on this land. He scanned the horizon, a vast expanse of muted browns and grays, occasionally broken by the stark black of fresh lava flows. The air was still, the heat radiating from the ground in shimmering waves. He raised his canteen to his lips, the water cool but insufficient to truly quench the dryness that had settled in his throat. He knew they would soon need to find a water source, a small oasis in this arid expanse. The journey was a test of endurance, not just for the cattle, but for the men who guided them, a slow, deliberate test of will against the elements. The sheer scale of the landscape could be overwhelming, yet within its vastness, Elias found a peculiar sense of peace, a release from the complexities of the world below. As the afternoon wore on, a subtle shift occurred in the light. The harsh glare of midday softened, the shadows lengthening once more, stretching like dark fingers across the volcanic plains. A gentle breeze, a welcome caress, began to stir, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and distant sea salt. Elias felt the wind ruffle his hair, lifting the fine dust from his clothes. The herd, too, seemed to respond to the change, their movements becoming a little more fluid, a little less dictated by the oppressive heat. He could hear the soft thud of hooves on the rock, the occasional flick of a tail, the low murmur of contented sighs. Kiko, his face streaked with dust and sweat, rode up alongside him. "Almost time to make camp, Elias," he said, his voice a low rumble that barely disturbed the quiet. Elias nodded, his eyes still scanning the horizon. The land, in its own slow way, was preparing for the cool embrace of night. He watched as a lone iwa bird, a black silhouette against the deepening sky, soared on the thermals, its wings outstretched in effortless flight. The shift in the light brought a subtle change to the colors of the land, deepening the shadows and accentuating the textures of the volcanic rock. The dust, catching the softer rays of the sun, seemed to glow with a gentle internal light. Elias felt a familiar sense of calm descend upon him as the day's work began to wind down. This was the peaceful interlude between the harshness of the day and the deep quiet of the night. He could sense the herds settling, their restless energy dissipating with the receding heat. The soft thudding of their hooves, the occasional lowing, formed a soothing cadence that lulled the senses. He thought of the day ahead, the miles yet to be covered, the challenges that still lay before them. But for now, there was this moment of transition, this gentle easing into the evening. The breeze whispered secrets through the sparse ohia lehua trees, their tough, leathery leaves rustling with a dry, papery sound. Elias watched a pair of apapane flit between the branches, their vibrant red plumage a startling splash of color against the muted landscape. These small moments of life, thriving in this seemingly inhospitable environment, always brought him a quiet sense of wonder. He breathed in the cool air, a welcome relief after the suffocating heat of midday. It carried the faint, sweet scent of dried grasses, mixed with the ever-present mineral tang of the earth. Night fell swiftly in the high country, a sudden extinguishment of light that transformed the familiar landscape into an ethereal realm. The stars, unburdened by the glare of civilization, blazed with an almost blinding intensity, a celestial river flowing across the black velvet sky. Elias sat by the small campfire, its flames casting dancing shadows that flickered against the stark volcanic rock. The herd, settled and calm, rustled softly in their makeshift corral, their silhouettes visible against the starlit ground. The silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the occasional snort of a horse, was profound, a tangible presence. He felt the cool night air on his skin, a stark contrast to the day's heat. He chewed slowly on a piece of dried uala, its earthy sweetness a simple comfort. This was the time for reflection, for the quiet introspection that the solitude of the paniolo life afforded. He thought of his family back in the valley, of the life that existed beyond these volcanic slopes. But his thoughts always returned to the present, to the immediate reality of the land beneath his feet, the stars above his head, and the gentle breathing of the herd around him.
The fire cast a warm, inviting glow, pushing back the vast darkness that surrounded them. Elias watched the flames, mesmerized by their ceaseless dance, the way they consumed the dry unauna branches with an almost voracious appetite. The scent of wood smoke was a comforting perfume, a primal aroma that spoke of sustenance and security. Io stood nearby, his dark silhouette a reassuring presence against the starlit backdrop. Elias could hear the soft, rhythmic breathing of the horse, a steady rhythm that mirrored the quiet pulse of the land. The cattle, too, were settled, their low murmurs and occasional shifting of weight the only sounds from their resting place. Elias felt a deep sense of contentment in this solitude, a peace that came from being utterly present in the moment, disconnected from the demands of the world beyond this high plateau. He was a small part of a vast, ancient landscape, a transient observer in its enduring narrative. The stars above were a breathtaking spectacle, each one a distant sun, a pinprick of light in the infinite darkness. He traced the familiar constellations, feeling a connection to generations of humans who had gazed upon the same celestial display, finding solace and wonder in its unchanging brilliance.
The following morning dawned with a soft, diffused light, the sun still masked by a lingering haze. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of dew-laden grasses. Elias rose before the sun fully asserted its dominance, the ritual of preparing breakfast a familiar comfort. The crackling of the fire, the scent of brewing coffee, the gentle nicker of Io, these were the anchors of his day. He watched as Kiko roused the other paniolo, their movements unhurried, their voices low and respectful. The herd, too, stirred, a low symphony of awakening. Elias felt a familiar sense of purpose settle over him. The journey was not just about reaching a destination, it was about the process, the slow, deliberate movement across the land. He swung himself into the saddle, the worn leather a familiar embrace. Io responded with a soft snort, ready for the day's work. The dust, though present, was less of a shroud and more of a soft veil in the gentler light. The cool morning air was a welcome balm after the intense heat of the previous day. Elias savored the crispness, the clarity of the atmosphere before the sun began its inevitable ascent and the dust devils would once again begin their swirling dance. The process of preparing breakfast was a meditation in motion, each familiar action bringing a sense of grounding. The aroma of brewing coffee, dark and rich, filled the small campsite. He shared a quiet moment with Kiko, their conversation a series of low murmurs and nods, a testament to their unspoken understanding. The other paniolo were already tending to their horses, their movements economical and efficient. Elias observed them with a practiced eye, noting the quiet pride in their shared endeavor. The herd was a vast, undulating presence, their collective breath a soft mist in the cool morning air. Elias felt a deep sense of responsibility for these animals, these providers of his livelihood, but more than that, they were fellow travelers in this rugged landscape, their lives intertwined with his own in a profound and elemental way. He checked the cinches on Io's saddle, ensuring everything was secure for the day ahead. The familiar weight of the reins in his hands was a comforting sensation, a direct connection to the powerful animal beneath him. As they began to gather the herd, the dust rose once more, a soft golden powder that settled like a benediction on the awakening land. Elias felt ready for whatever the day might bring, his senses alert, his purpose clear. The path today wound through a landscape of ancient lava flows, the jagged obsidian rock creating a challenging terrain. Elias navigated Io with practiced ease, the horse's hooves finding purchase on the uneven surfaces. The herd, strung out in a long, winding line, picked its way carefully, their bulk requiring a slower, more deliberate pace. The sun began to climb, its heat gradually intensifying. Elias could feel the familiar prickle of sweat on his brow, the slight dryness in his throat. He glanced at Kiko, who was expertly guiding a stray calf back into the main body of the herd, his movements economical and precise. Elias felt a quiet satisfaction in Kiko's progress. This land demanded respect, and those who learned to respect it, learned its rhythms, found their place within its ancient embrace. The lava fields stretched out before them like a solidified ocean, the rock formations twisted and contorted, a testament to the violent geological forces that had shaped them. Elias kept a watchful eye on the herd, ensuring no animal strayed too far from the group, particularly near the more precarious edges of the lava flows. The smaller, more agile steers often tested the boundaries, their curiosity sometimes outweighing their caution. Io, with its sure-footedness and innate understanding of the terrain, navigated the treacherous ground with a steady confidence. Elias trusted the horse implicitly, a bond forged over countless miles and countless sunrises. He saw Kiko skillfully herd a young bull that had momentarily broken rank, his approach calm and authoritative, not aggressive. The boy was developing a keen sense of the cattle's moods, learning to anticipate their movements before they happened. This was a crucial skill, one that separated a good paniolo from a merely adequate one. Elias admired the boy's dedication, the quiet focus he brought to his tasks. The sun's heat was beginning to intensify, the air growing thick and heavy. Elias knew they would soon be seeking a spot of shade, a brief respite before continuing their slow progression across the island's rugged spine. He felt a pang of thirst, a reminder to ration his water carefully. Every drop was precious in this arid landscape. He adjusted his posture in the saddle, feeling the familiar ache in his lower back, a testament to the hours spent in the saddle. Yet it was a good ache, a reminder of purpose, of work that was deeply ingrained in his soul. He looked out at the vast, empty landscape, a panorama of raw, elemental beauty, and felt a profound sense of peace. It was a solitude that nourished him, a quiet communion with the earth that he wouldn't trade for anything.
The wind, a constant companion in the high country, began to pick up as the day wore on. It swept across the volcanic slopes, carrying with it the scent of distant Iliahi, sandalwood, and the ever-present volcanic dust. The dust swirled and eddied around the herd, creating ephemeral patterns, brief, dancing veils that obscured and then revealed the patient beasts. Elias felt the wind tug at his hat, whistle past his ears. It was a sound that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat, a lullaby of the high country. He watched as a flock of ua'u, shearwaters, wheeled and dipped in the vast expanse of the sky, their effortless flight a stark contrast to the slow, arduous journey of the herd below. There was a profound sense of interconnectedness in these moments, a feeling of being a small but integral part of a much larger, more ancient tapestry. The wind here was a capricious force, sometimes a gentle whisper, at others a fierce gale that could reshape the very landscape. Today it offered a welcome respite from the building heat, a cooling breath that stirred the fine dust into a shimmering haze. Elias felt it lift the strands of hair from his forehead, carrying with it the faint resinous scent of sandalwood from the lower elevations, a hint of the world beyond these stark volcanic plains. The dust devils, born from the heated earth and the swirling wind, danced across the landscape like mischievous spirits, momentarily obscuring the view before dissipating as quickly as they appeared. Elias watched a flock of shearwaters, their sleek bodies dark against the bright sky, carve effortless arcs through the air. They were masters of the wind, their movements fluid and unburdened. He often envied their freedom, their ability to traverse these vast distances with such grace. Yet he knew his own purpose was grounded. His journey is vital, albeit slower and more deliberate. The herd, too, seemed to respond to the wind's presence, their ears swiveling, their heads lifting to catch the subtle changes in the air. He kept a close eye on them, ensuring the gentle breeze didn't create any undue agitation, driving them towards any unseen precipices. The land itself seemed to breathe with the wind, a subtle exhalation that carried the whispers of time, the echoes of ancient eruptions, the slow, patient growth of life in the most unlikely places. Elias felt a sense of belonging in this constant movement, this interplay of wind, dust, and animal life, a part of the island's enduring rhythm.
Midday brought its inevitable heat, a heavy blanket that pressed down on the land. The herds sought out the sparse patches of shade offered by the low-lying ohia lehua trees, their broad leaves providing a welcome respite. Elias and the other paniolo found shelter beneath a weathered overhang of basalt, the cool stone a balm against their sun-warmed skin. The silence here was broken only by the buzzing of unseen insects and the occasional sigh of the wind. Elias drank deeply from his canteen, the water cool and refreshing, though it did little to quench the persistent dryness in his throat. He observed the cattle, their slow, deliberate movements, their quiet patience. They were beings of this land, adapted to its harsh beauty, their lives dictated by its rhythms. The oppressive heat seemed to hang in the air, making every movement an effort. The cattle, sensing the intensity of the sun, clustered together in the meager shade offered by the hardy ohia lehua trees. Their broad, leathery leaves, though sparse, provided a crucial refuge. Elias and the other paniolo dismounted, allowing their horses to graze on the tough una grass that managed to sprout from the cracks in the lava. The overhang of basalt provided a welcome coolness, the ancient rock absorbing the day's heat and radiating it back as a gentle warmth. Elias leaned against the stone, feeling its solid, unyielding presence. The silence was amplified in this sheltered spot, the absence of wind creating a pocket of stillness. The only sounds were the incessant drone of unseen insects, a high-pitched hum that seemed to vibrate in the very air, and the occasional rustle of leaves as a bird flitted through the branches. He took a long, slow drink from his canteen, the water tasting clean and pure, a stark contrast to the dusty dryness that permeated everything else. It offered a temporary relief, but the thirst was a persistent companion on these journeys. He watched the cattle, their unhurried grazing, their placid demeanor. They were creatures perfectly attuned to this environment, their lives a testament to resilience and adaptation. There was a quiet strength in their presence, a reflection of the enduring spirit of the land itself. Elias felt a kinship with them in this shared endurance, this slow, deliberate existence under the vast Hawaiian sky. The journey was not a race, but a passage, a sustained effort that required patience and an intimate understanding of the rhythms of nature.
As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and crimson, a sense of weary accomplishment settled over Elias. The herd was moving steadily towards the designated grazing area, their flanks dusted with the day's journey. The light softened, the shadows lengthened, and the heat began to recede, replaced by the cool embrace of the approaching evening. He could hear the gentle clinking of hobbles as the paniolo prepared to settle the herd for the night. The rhythm of their work, though physically demanding, was also deeply soothing, a grounding force in the vastness of the landscape. The colors of the sky transformed, shifting from the harsh glare of midday to a symphony of soft pastels, then deepening into fiery oranges and reds as the sun dipped below the horizon. The shadows stretched long and distorted, turning the familiar landscape into something otherworldly, mysterious. Elias felt a sense of quiet satisfaction as he surveyed the herd. They had moved well, their progress steady and sure despite the challenging terrain. The paniolo, including Kiko, worked with a practiced efficiency, their movements fluid and economical, a dance honed by years of experience. The gentle clinking of the hobbles as they secured the cattle for the night was a familiar sound, a signal that the day's labor was drawing to a close. Elias felt the day's exertions settling into his muscles, a pleasant weariness that spoke of a job well done. The air began to cool, carrying with it the subtle scent of damp earth and the faintest hint of distant sea salt. He could feel the land exhaling the day's heat, preparing for the cool stillness of the night. There was a profound peace in these moments, a feeling of being in perfect harmony with his surroundings. He watched as Kiko expertly guided a few stragglers into the protective circle of the herd, his focus unwavering. The boy was becoming a true paniolo, absorbing the lessons of patience, perseverance, and respect for the land. Elias felt a quiet pride in his nephew's development. The journey across these slopes was more than just a herding task. It was a passage of learning, a test of character, and a deepening of connection to the ancestral ways.
Night fell, a velvet cloak studded with 1,000,000 diamond-bright stars. The campfire, a small beacon of warmth and light, cast dancing shadows against the rough volcanic rock. Elias sat by its glow, the silence of the night broken only by the crackling flames and the contented sighs of the herd. He felt the cool hair on his face, the subtle scent of wood smoke and dry earth filling his nostrils. This was the time of quiet reflection, of allowing the day's experiences to settle into his mind like fine dust. He thought of the ancestral lands, the stories whispered by the wind, the enduring spirit of his people. The vast expanse of the night sky was a constant source of wonder. Untouched by city lights, the stars here seemed to burn with an inner fire, a breathtaking display of celestial brilliance. Elias often felt humbled by their immensity, reminded of his own small place in the grand scheme of things. The campfire provided a circle of warmth and light, a temporary haven against the encroaching darkness. He watched the flames consume the dry branches, their energy a palpable force. The crackling sound was a comforting counterpoint to the profound silence of the high country. He chewed slowly on a piece of dried uala, the simple, earthy sweetness of familiar taste that grounded him. He thought about his family, their laughter and warmth, a cherished memory that sustained him during these solitary journeys. He missed them, of course, but there was also a deep satisfaction in fulfilling his role, in continuing the traditions of his ancestors. The land itself held a timeless quality, its volcanic rock bearing the marks of eons of geological upheaval and slow, persistent erosion. Elias felt like a fleeting visitor in its ancient presence. He listened to the gentle sounds of the herd settling, the soft shuffling of hooves, the occasional contented moo. They too were finding their rest, their own quiet rhythm within the vast stillness of the night. He felt a profound peace, a stillness that permeated his very being. It was in these moments of quiet contemplation, under the canopy of 1,000,000 stars, that Elias felt most truly himself, most deeply connected to the spirit of Hawaii. The dawn arrived not with a sudden burst of light, but with a soft, pearly luminescence that gradually illuminated the volcanic slopes. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the subtle scent of damp earth and wild thyme. Elias stirred the embers of the campfire, the familiar ritual a grounding presence. Io nickered softly, sensing the day's imminent beginning. Kiko, already tending to the horses, offered a quiet nod of acknowledgement. The herd, a restless mass of brown and black, began to stir, their lowing a gentle chorus that echoed across the silent plains. Elias swung himself into the saddle, the worn leather a familiar embrace, and nudged Io forward, the first step of another slow, dusty journey across the ancient, breathing land. The soft pre-dawn light painted the landscape in shades of silver and rose, a gentle awakening before the sun's full force descended. Elias cherished these quiet moments, the stillness before the day's labor began in earnest. The cool air was invigorating, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat that would soon dominate the volcanic slopes. He watched Kiko moving with a quiet efficiency, his early start a testament to his growing maturity and dedication. The boy's movements were becoming more fluid, more confident, each gesture honed by practice and an innate respect for the task at hand. The herd's stirring was a gradual crescendo, a low murmur that built into a soft chorus of awakening bovine life.
Elias felt a familiar surge of purpose, the quiet hum of anticipation for the day's journey. He adjusted the saddle, ensuring Io was comfortable and ready for the miles ahead. The horse, sensing Elias's intent, shifted its weight, its breath puffing out in soft clouds in the cool air. Elias felt the familiar weight of the reins, the strong, steady presence of the animal beneath him. Together they were a unit, moving with the slow, deliberate rhythm of the land itself. As they began to guide the herd, the dust rose again, a gentle reminder of the pervasive element that defined their journey. It settled on Elias's clothes, on Io's flanks, a fine golden powder that seemed to absorb the light. He kept his gaze steady, his mind attuned to the subtle cues of the land and the animals. This was his life, his calling, a continuation of ancient traditions played out across these timeless slopes.
The journey continued, a slow, deliberate march across the undulating volcanic plains. The dust, a constant companion, swirled around the hooves of the cattle, a golden haze that softened the harsh contours of the land. Elias kept a steady hand on the reins, his gaze sweeping across the rugged terrain, his senses attuned to the subtle shifts in the wind, the distant calls of birds. He noted the resilient ahina-hina, silver sword, clinging to the rocky outcrops, their silvery leaves a testament to their tenacity. Kiko, ever vigilant, skillfully guided a group of skittish heifers away from a steep ravine, his movements economical and precise. The subtle choreography of the herd, guided by the quiet expertise of the paniolo, unfolded with a timeless grace. Each step of the journey was a deliberate act, a measured progression across the vast, untamed expanse. Elias felt the familiar weariness settle into his bones, a deep bone-marrow fatigue that was both physical and existential, the weight of time and distance. Yet it was a weariness that brought with it a sense of profound peace. The land offered no shortcuts, no easy paths, only the slow, steady unveiling of its beauty and its challenges. He observed the tenacious ahina-hina, its silvery leaves like sun-bleached hair clinging to the harsh volcanic rock, a symbol of life's enduring will. Kiko's skill in managing the herd, particularly the skittish heifers, was a testament to his growing experience. His movements were fluid, his commands soft but firm, ensuring the animals stayed within the designated path. Elias recognized the subtle language of the paniolo, a silent communication that transcended words, an understanding forged in shared experience. The calls of birds, distant and ethereal, punctuated the vast silence, their songs a fleeting counterpoint to the steady rhythm of the herd. Elias felt a deep connection to all living things in this wild, exposed place, a sense of being part of something larger than himself. The dust continued to rise, a constant reminder of the earth's breath, a fine powder that settled on everything, softening the harsh edges of their passage. This was the essence of their journey, a slow, patient movement, an enduring testament to the resilience of both man and beast in the face of nature's raw power. The midday sun, a relentless force, pressed down on the volcanic slopes, heat shimmering above the lava fields, distorting the distant landscape. Elias sought refuge from the oppressive glare beneath a cluster of weathered rocks, the cool stone offering a welcome respite. Io grazed placidly, its broad muzzle nudging the sparse vegetation. The silence here was profound, broken only by the incessant hum of unseen insects and the distant, mournful lowing of the herd. Elias drank deeply from his canteen, the water a life-sustaining gift in the parched landscape. He watched the cattle, their patient endurance, their quiet acceptance of their lot. They were creatures of this unforgiving land, and in their stoic presence, Elias found a quiet understanding. The heat was a tangible presence, pressing down with an almost physical weight. Elias felt the sweat trickling down his temples, stinging his eyes if he wasn't careful.
The cattle had instinctively sought out the meager shade offered by the scattered, hardy ohia lehua trees, their dark green leaves providing a welcome contrast to the pervasive gray and black of the volcanic rock. Elias and his small crew of paniolo dismounted, their horses gratefully taking advantage of the brief lull in the day's work to graze on the sparse, tough una grass. The cluster of weathered rocks offered a welcome sanctuary, the stone cool against Elias's skin, a subtle relief from the oppressive heat. He leaned back, feeling the solid, ancient stone against his spine. The silence in this sheltered spot was almost absolute, a stark contrast to the constant murmurs of the herd and the occasional whinny of a horse. The only sounds were the incessant, high-pitched hum of unseen insects, a sound that seemed to permeate the very air, and the distant, mournful lowing of the cattle, a reminder of their presence and their slow, steady progress. Elias raised his canteen, savoring the cool, life-giving liquid. It was a simple pleasure, but one that carried immense significance in this arid environment. He watched the cattle, their movements slow and deliberate, their patience seemingly boundless. They were creatures perfectly attuned to this demanding landscape, their lives a testament to the resilience of nature. He found a quiet kinship with them in their stoic endurance, their uncomplaining acceptance of the harsh conditions. It was a reflection of his own life, his own journey across these unforgiving slopes. As the afternoon began to yield to the approaching evening, the sun's fiery intensity softened, casting long, elongated shadows across the landscape. A gentle breeze, a welcome caress, swept across the volcanic slopes, stirring the dust into ephemeral patterns. Elias remounted Io, the worn leather of the saddle a familiar comfort. The herd, sensing the approaching evening, began to move with a renewed purpose, their hooves striking a rhythmic cadence on the hardened lava. Kiko rode up alongside him, his face streaked with dust, but his eyes bright with a quiet satisfaction. "We are nearing the next water source, Elias," he said, his voice a low rumble that barely disturbed the stillness. Elias offered a slight nod, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the sky was beginning to blush with the soft hues of approaching twilight. The landscape underwent a subtle transformation as the sun began its descent. The harsh glare of midday gave way to softer, warmer tones, the shadows deepening and stretching, lending a new dimension to the familiar terrain. Elias felt the welcome caress of the breeze, a gentle movement of air that stirred the dust into fleeting golden clouds. It carried with it the faint scent of dry earth and a hint of distant sea salt, a promise of the coastal plains that lay far beyond these volcanic heights. He remounted Io, the worn leather of the saddle a familiar comfort, a well-loved extension of himself. The horse, sensing the shift in the day, seemed to gather itself, ready to resume the slow, steady pace. The herd, too, responded to the changing light, their collective consciousness attuned to the approaching end of the day's journey. The sound of their hooves on the lava rock, a soft, persistent rhythm, seemed to echo the very pulse of the land. Kiko rode up, his face a mask of dust and sweat, but his eyes held a bright clarity, a quiet satisfaction in the day's progress. "We are nearing the next water source, Elias," he announced, his voice a low rumble that was almost lost in the vastness of the open space. Elias nodded, acknowledging the news. It was a small milestone, but a significant one in their slow, deliberate journey. He fixed his gaze on the horizon, where the sky was beginning to bleed into soft hues of rose and gold, the first blush of twilight. It was a moment of transition, a pause between the intensity of the day and the quiet stillness of the night. Elias felt a deep sense of peace, a quiet contentment that came from simply being present in this ancient, breathing landscape. The journey was far from over, but each step, each sunrise and sunset, was a part of a larger, enduring story, a story etched in dust and time.